There are some stories in Hollywood that shine brightly for a moment and then fade away, and then there are stories like Thora Birch Quiet, powerful and deeply human, the kind that doesn't scream for attention but stays with you long after. The spotlight moves on because her journey isn't just about fame. It's about resilience, identity, and the courage to keep going when the world stops watching. And if you truly look closely at her life, you'll realize that success isn't always loud. Sometimes it's a silent battle fought behind the scenes, where every step forward is a victory no one applauds but still matters because Thora Birch didn't just grow up in Hollywood, she survived it, she endured it, and in many ways, she redefined what it means to stay true to yourself in an industry that constantly tries to reshape you. And it all began when she was just a little girl stepping into a world that most adults struggle to understand, a world filled with cameras, expectations, and pressure, and yet she stood there not as someone pretending to be strong, but as someone who naturally carried a presence that couldn't be ignored. Her early performances were not just cute or impressive for a child, they were real, emotionally grounded, and deeply captivating. And when she appeared in projects like Hocus Pocus and later the groundbreaking American Beauty, it became clear that she wasn't just another child actor passing through Hollywood's revolving door. She was someone with depth, someone who could hold her own even among seasoned actors, someone whose eyes told stories that words couldn't fully capture. And as audiences watched her grow, there was a sense of authenticity in her performances that felt rare, almost fragile, as if she was giving a part of herself each time she stepped in front of the camera. And maybe that's why her journey feels so personal, because it wasn't built on artificial charm or manufactured fame. It was built on something real, something honest, something that connected with people on a deeper level. But what many don't realize is that behind that early success was a complex reality, a life shaped by decisions, challenges, and circumstances that were far from easy. Because growing up in Hollywood is not the dream people imagine. It's not just red carpets and applause, it's pressure, scrutiny, and a constant struggle to maintain your identity while the world tries to define you. And for Thora Birch, that struggle became even more intense as she transitioned from child roles to more mature performances. A phase where many actors lose their footing, where the industry starts to question your place, your relevance, your direction, and this is where her story takes a turn that is both inspiring and heartbreaking, because instead of following the typical path, instead of chasing trends or conforming to expectations, she faced obstacles that pushed her out of the mainstream spotlight. And suddenly the same industry that once celebrated her began to distance itself. And this is where most stories would end, where people fade away quietly, becoming a forgotten name in a long list of what could have been. But Thora Birch's story doesn't end there. Because what defines her is not the absence of fame, but the presence of resilience, the ability to continue even when recognition disappears. And that is something far more powerful than any award or headline, because it takes a different kind of strength to rebuild when the world is no longer watching, to keep believing in your craft when the applause has faded, and to stay true to who you are when it would be easier to change just to fit in, and in a world obsessed with constant visibility. Her journey reminds us that there is dignity in stepping back. There is courage in choosing your own path, and there is strength in silence. Because not every battle needs to be broadcasted to be real, and not every success needs to be measured by fame. And as time passed, she slowly began to re-emerge, taking on roles that reflected her growth, her maturity, and her evolving perspective, not trying to reclaim the past, but building something new, something authentic, and in doing so, she showed that it's never too late to redefine your story. That setbacks are not endings, but transitions. And that sometimes the most meaningful journeys are the ones that happen away from the spotlight. Because that's where you find yourself, that's where you rediscover your purpose, and that's where true strength is built. And if you look at her career today, you won't just see an actress. You'll see a survivor, someone who has faced the highs and lows of an unpredictable industry and still chose to keep going. Someone who didn't let setbacks define her, but instead used them as stepping stones. And that is a lesson that goes far beyond Hollywood, because in life we all face moments where things don't go as planned, where doors close unexpectedly, where the path ahead becomes uncertain, and in those moments it's easy to feel lost, to question your worth, to wonder if you've been forgotten. But Thora Birch's story teaches us that being forgotten by the world doesn't mean you've lost your value. It simply means you have the opportunity to rediscover it on your own terms, to rebuild without pressure, to grow without expectations, and to create a life that is not defined by external validation but by internal strength. And that is something incredibly powerful, because when you reach that point, when you stop chasing approval and start focusing on authenticity, everything changes, your perspective shifts, your priorities realign, and you begin to see that success is not about staying at the top. It's about staying true to yourself no matter where you are. And that's exactly what makes her story so inspiring, because it's not perfect, it's not polished, it's real, it's messy, it's human, and in that imperfection lies its beauty, because it reminds us that we don't have to have everything figured out. We don't have to follow a straight path, we don't have to meet everyone's expectations. All we have to do is keep moving forward, keep believing in ourselves, and keep holding on to the parts of us that make us unique, because those are the things that truly matter. And in a world that constantly tries to define success in narrow terms, her journey stands as a quiet but powerful reminder that there is no single way to succeed, that every path is different, and that sometimes the most meaningful victories are the ones no one sees, the ones that happen within us, the ones that shape who we become. And as you reflect on her story, maybe you'll start to see your own struggles in a different light. Maybe you'll realize that setbacks are not failures, that pauses are not endings, and that your journey, no matter how uncertain it may seem, still holds value, still holds potential, and still holds the possibility of something beautiful. Because just like Thora Birch, you have the strength to keep going, to rebuild, to rise again, and to create a story that is uniquely yours, a story that doesn't need to be loud to be powerful, a story that doesn't need constant attention to be meaningful, a story that, in its own quiet way, can inspire more people than you ever imagined. Because sometimes the strongest voices are the ones that don't shout, they simply endure, they persist, and they remind us that no matter how many times life tries to push us down, we always have the power to stand back up again. And if you think her story is only about what she lost or what faded away, then you've only seen half the picture, because the truth is, the most powerful part of Thora Birch's journey begins. After the noise disappears, after the fame slows down, after the world moves on to its next obsession, because that's where real character is revealed, not in the spotlight, but in the silence that follows it. And for many, that silence feels like the end, like a door closing with no way back in. But for her, it became something different, something deeper, almost like a test of identity. A moment where she had to decide whether she was just a product of Hollywood's attention or something far more enduring. And what makes her story so compelling is that she didn't chase relevance in a desperate way. She didn't try to force herself back into the same mold that once defined her. Instead, she allowed herself to evolve, to step back, to breathe, and to understand who she was beyond the roles, beyond the cameras, beyond the expectations. And that kind of self-awareness is rare in an industry built on constant validation, because when the applause fades, many lose their sense of purpose. But she chose to rebuild hers from within, slowly, quietly, without the need for headlines. And that is where her strength becomes undeniable, because rebuilding your identity is far more difficult than building fame. It requires honesty, patience, and the courage to face uncertainty without losing yourself. And in that process, she became more than just an actress. She became a symbol of resilience for anyone who has ever felt overlooked, forgotten, or pushed aside. Because her journey speaks to a universal truth that success is not a straight line. It's a series of rises and falls, moments of clarity and confusion, victories and setbacks. And what truly matters is not how high you climb, but how you respond. When you fall, and if you look closely, you'll see that her return to acting wasn't about reclaiming what she once had. It was about redefining what success meant to her, taking on roles that reflected her growth, her depth, her lived experiences, Roles that didn't just showcase her talent, but also her evolution as a person, and that's something many people overlook, because we often expect people to remain the same, to stay frozen in the version we first admired.